Welcome to the first yawn, where stories aren't told to you, they happen around you. If you enjoy being gently pulled into other places, other lives, just before sleep, please like, subscribe, and leave us a comment. Let us know where you would like to wander next. An ancient battlefield, a dusty saloon, or maybe a forgotten space capsule. We make sure to read every suggestion. Tonight, we begin far in the north, beyond the farms or the roads, even beyond the reach of kings. It is the 9th century. Winter has settled deep into the forest. Snow covers every branch, every hill, every sound. Your sled is packed. You have furs to trade, and a long journey ahead, south towards strangers. But something in the air feels different this time. Now, close your eyes and let's begin. The snow came in the night. It settled over everything, the spruce branches, the coiled ropes, the roof of the tent. Even the sled runners look softened now, blurred at the edges where frost clings like ash. You step carefully through it, your boots sinking deep into the fresh layer. The sky is pale. It's morning, but only barely. This far north, in the coldest part of winter, the sun doesn't climb far. Just a faint gold shimmer along the edge of the forest. Behind you stands the lavu, a low, cone-shaped shelter made of wooden poles and reindeer hides. It holds the warmth from last night's fire. Inside, your cousin still sleeps, curled up beside the fire pit stones, face half covered by a fur hood. A thin trail of smoke curls from the vent at the top of the tent, twisting against the still air. Somewhere beyond the birch grove, you hear the reindeer shift. The soft clinking of harness bells comes in waves, subtle, uneven, never quite in rhythm. They are used to waiting, but they sense movement ahead. The migration trail lies just beyond the ridge. You breathe slowly. The air is cold enough to sting a little at the edges of your nose, but it's clean and quiet. So quiet you can hear the snow settling, as if the land is exhaling. This is how a good journey begins. With stillness, with patience, with the weight of snow pressing gently against the earth. You kneel to brush frost from the sled, checking the rope ties and bone runners. Everything is in place. Today, you will begin the long journey toward the southern coast. There, if the weather holds and the Norse traders have returned, you will offer carved antler, smoked fish, and fine winter furs in exchange for silver, iron, salt, and grain. You know the route well. So did your father, and his father before him. But something feels different this year. A weight in the quiet, a hesitation in the wind. You glance toward the south, over the ridge where the trees thin out and the trail curves downward. Then you stand. Take one last breath of the morning air and begin. The Sámi people are indigenous to the northern regions of what is now Norway, Sweden, Finland, and the Kola Peninsula of Russia. They have lived in these lands for thousands of years, long before the Viking Age began. A lavu is a traditional Sámi tent-like dwelling, similar in shape to a teepee but with a different internal structure. It was portable, warm, and practical for reindeer herders following seasonal migrations. Reindeer herding is central to Sámi life and identity. While not all Sámi were herders historically, those who did often migrated with the seasons, following ancestral paths and weather patterns. Trade between Sámi and Norse communities began well before the Viking Age, and intensified from the 9th to the 11th century. Sámi goods, especially furs, antlers, and fish, were highly valued by Norse traders. The aurora borealis, harsh winters, and long periods of twilight or darkness were normal features of life in the far north. The Sámi calendar and spiritual worldview were deeply tied to these environmental rhythms. You move steadily through the forest, following the reindeer as they wind between snow-covered birches and dense patches of spruce. The sleds glide over the crusted snow, leaving long, narrow tracks that curve with the land. Your cousin walks behind you, quiet, his breath trailing in pale ribbons through the cold air. The sky is still low and dim, but brighter now than before. A faint breeze stirs the treetops, shaking loose a soft drift of snow that falls silently to the ground. This path is old. You were taught to read it not by signs or markers, but by memory, where the land rises just before the river crossing, where the trees grow thinner near the fox den, where the air feels colder before the open ridge. Your father once led the way here. His voice comes to mind easily now, calm and certain as he pointed out the shape of a rock or the lean of a tree and called it knowledge. You remember how he would hum to the reindeer, and how they always responded, sometimes with quiet steps, sometimes with stillness. Around midday, you stop near a frozen stream. The reindeer begin to dig at the snow with their hooves, searching for lichen beneath the surface. You untie a parcel of dried fish and pass a strip to your cousin, who accepts it without a word. The silence between you is familiar, comfortable, but it doesn't last. Farther down the trail, past a bend in the riverbank, you see something strange, shapes that break the line of the trees. You slow your steps. The reindeer hesitate. The air feels sharper. As you approach, it becomes clear, a campsite, or what's left of one. The fire pit is cold. Charred wood lies scattered around it, blackened and split. The frame of a sled sits nearby, half collapsed. The skin walls of a lavu have been pulled down and folded in on themselves. No footprints remain, no sign of who was here. Only the smell, faint but still present, of smoke and old pine resin. Your cousin crouches beside a broken tent pole and lifts a small object from the snow. A carved piece of antler, cracked clean through. He turns it over, then slips it into his pouch without speaking. You both stand there for a while, saying nothing. Then you turn back to the sleds and begin to move again, slowly, carefully. The reindeer walk without needing to be told. The Sámi traditionally followed seasonal migration routes with their reindeer herds, moving between inland grazing lands in winter and coastal areas in warmer months. These routes were learned through observation, oral teaching, and careful attention to environmental cues. Memory and oral tradition were central to Sámi navigation and history. Instead of maps or written records, Sámi people passed down knowledge of terrain, weather, and safe travel routes through stories, songs, and lived instruction. Frozen rivers and lakes were often used as travel corridors during winter, allowing sleds to move smoothly over ice. Reindeer were trained to pull sleds and to recognize familiar paths by scent and instinct. In uncertain times, Sámi travelers occasionally encountered abandoned or destroyed camps, which could be the result of illness, accident, or, during periods of tension, raids by outsiders, including Norse groups seeking tribute or territory. Carved antler items were common in Sámi material culture. They were used for tools, trade goods, ritual charms, and personal ornamentation. A broken charm might have been a practical object or something sacred. The wind shifts as the path turns eastward, and the trees grow taller. The snow beneath your feet has a crust now, just thick enough to hold your weight before breaking. Every few steps, your boots sink slightly through the surface with a soft, creaking sound. By evening, the light is already fading. You reach a clearing where a cluster of lavis stands around a shared fire. The air smells of wood smoke, cooked fish, and boiled spruce tips. Two children sit near the fire's edge, twisting lengths of sinew into cord. One of the older women waves you in silently, her expression familiar. You have passed through this camp before, many winters ago. Your cousin kneels to unfasten the sled harnesses. You brush snow from your cloak and enter the largest tent, where the heat is heavy and the walls flicker with firelight. The air inside is rich with the smell of juniper and burned fat. A low, steady humming comes from the far side of the tent, where an old man sits cross-legged on a thick reindeer skin, his hands resting on his knees. The Noaidi does not speak at first. His eyes are closed. The humming continues, slow and even, as the fire crackles between you. You kneel and place a wrapped bundle of dried marrowbone near the stones. When the sound stops, the silence feels deeper than before. He opens his eyes and studies you quietly. Then he takes a handful of birch bark and tosses it into the fire. The flames rise, casting long shadows across the hide walls. From a pouch at his side, he draws a curved piece of antler and begins to trace shapes into the ash with its tip. You do not ask questions. You are taught not to. After some time, he speaks. His voice is thin and low, the kind that drifts rather than carries. He says the snow is too dry for this time of year, and the wind is circling in the wrong direction. He says the trees are too still, and the birds have not flown where they should. He says the spirits are quiet, which is not always a blessing. You offer a strip of dried fish in return, and a flat stone taken from the place your grandfather was buried. The Noaidi nods. He accepts both, then leans back and closes his eyes again. Outside, the wind presses gently at the side of the tent. It is time to rest. Tomorrow, you will reach the fjord. A Noaidi was a spiritual leader, or shaman, among the Sámi. Noaidis served as healers, mediators, and keepers of spiritual knowledge. They used songs, drum rituals, trance states, and symbolic tools to interpret signs from the spirit world. Fire rituals were common in Sámi spiritual practice. Offerings such as bone, fat, fish, and carved objects were burned or placed near sacred fire pits to seek guidance or protection from ancestral spirits. Sámi worldview was deeply animistic, meaning that natural features such as stones, trees, rivers, and animals were believed to have spirits. Environmental signs like wind direction, animal movement, and silence in the forest were all meaningful. Birch bark, antler tools, and spruce branches were frequently used in ceremonies, both for their spiritual symbolism and their availability in the northern environment. Sámi societies often lived in seasonally shifting camps, where extended families or multiple groups might gather temporarily during migrations or trade. Fire sharing in these contexts was both practical and ceremonial. The sky brightens slightly as you descend from the ridge. The wind carries the scent of salt and damp stone. You can hear the distant sound of waves brushing against ice at the shoreline, broken only by the low call of seabirds wheeling overhead. The land opens gradually. Trees become sparse, and patches of open ground appear where the snow has been swept thin by the wind. You pause at a rise overlooking the fjord. Below, the bay curves inward, cradled by dark rock and frozen earth. They are already here. A Norse ship rests in the shallows, long and low, with its sail furled and tied down. The hull is painted in dark reds and pale wood, streaked with salt. Men move slowly along the beach, carrying goods from the boat to the shore. You see barrels, bags, the gleam of iron tools. You recognize some of the faces, men who have traded here in winters past. But there are new ones too, and more of them. A few wear shirts of mail and carry axes openly, even as they unload cargo. Your cousin says nothing, but you both slow your steps. Closer to the beach, you spot the outlines of a rough Norse camp, a fire pit dug into gravel, rows of bundled goods wrapped in sailcloth, a few small shelters built from pine branches and tarred canvas. A familiar figure walks among them, a young Norseman with light hair, tall and broad-shouldered, though not fully grown. You traded with him once. He had a kind laugh then, and brought fine combs made of whalebone. He does not look at you now. You stop at a respectful distance, a good space for waiting. Too close, and it becomes a challenge. Too far, and it looks like fear. The wind blows steady off the water. Somewhere nearby, you hear a dog bark. A Norse elder steps forward from the camp. He is wrapped in furs, and his face is deeply lined. He raises a hand, but does not smile. You return the gesture, then begin to unpack your sled. The trade has not begun yet, but it has already changed. During the Viking Age, Norse traders often traveled north along the Norwegian coast to trade with the Sámi. These trips typically occurred in late winter or early spring, when frozen terrain made overland travel easier for the Sámi. Norse ships were designed to travel in both open sea and shallow coastal waters. Longships and knarrs were commonly used for trade, and could be pulled ashore easily. Norse groups often established temporary shore camps for the duration of trade expeditions. These sites included fire pits, basic shelters, and secure areas for goods. While some interactions were peaceful and sustained, historical sources suggest that tensions grew over time, especially as Norse settlers began claiming land farther north. What began as trade sometimes became tribute, and later evolved into political control. Norse sagas occasionally mention Sámi people, often portraying them as traders, hunters, or practitioners of magic. While these depictions were often shaped by myth, they reflect real contact between the two cultures. The sun has climbed no higher, but the light has shifted. Thin clouds roll in from the sea, filtering the pale glow into a flat, silvery haze. The smell of salt and smoke settles over the bay. You finish arranging your trade goods in a neat display beside the sled. A thick fur laid out on the ground holds carved antler spoons, bundles of dried fish, a coil of sinew, a pair of snow goggles made from bone. Your cousin adds a small pouch of red ochre, freshly powdered. Across the camp, the Norsemen have done the same. Their goods are simpler but heavier. A stack of iron blades, coarse wool cloth, 2 silver arm rings, a wooden chest that smells faintly of honey and pitch. The Norse elder steps forward first. He inspects the fur without touching it, then nods toward the carved antlers. He asks where they came from, though he likely knows. His tone is even. Not friendly, but not hostile. You answer carefully. He listens, then gestures to the chest. He offers a measure of iron and 2 of the wool cloth in exchange for the fur and the carvings. You don't respond at first. You wait, hands still, eyes on the snow between you. When you finally speak, you offer less. A single fur, no antler, in return for 1 bundle of cloth and a handful of salt. The elder's face shifts slightly. He does not like it, but he does not argue. He turns and walks away. Other Norsemen step forward now. The younger ones, less practiced in the slow rhythm of trade. One of them picks up the bone goggles, laughs, and passes them to his companion. They joke in a language you mostly understand, but pretend not to. Your cousin watches them without smiling. Then, you hear your name. The young Norseman from earlier, the one who once traded with you, has stepped closer. He speaks softly, asking about the dried fish, then about the reindeer. His eyes are quieter than the others. Still curious, but guarded. Before you can answer, a different voice calls out. The elder returns, but this time his words are sharper. He points toward the sled and says something about tribute, not trade, not barter. A gift, in return for peace. The air changes. You do not raise your voice, but you speak clearly. These are goods for trade, you say, not for tribute. If peace must be purchased, it is no longer peace. For a long moment, nothing moves. Then the elder grunts, says nothing more, and walks back toward the fire. Your cousin picks up the snow goggles, brushes off the prints, and places them gently back in the center of the fur. The trade is not over, but it has been marked. Sámi trade practices were rooted in careful negotiation. Goods were exchanged in quiet, deliberate encounters, often with a great deal of unspoken communication. Items were displayed on furs or sleds and were evaluated without rushing. Norse traders brought metal tools, wool, salt, and silver, which were valuable in Sámi communities. In return, Sámi provided furs, carved bone or antler tools, dried fish, and reindeer products. Over time, some Norse leaders began to expect tribute from Sámi groups, especially in coastal regions. This shift from trade to tribute marked the beginning of unequal political relations and eventual claims of overlordship. The concept of tribute, sometimes referred to in later sources as Fingeld, became part of medieval Norwegian taxation in the north. However, in the 9th and 10th century, these demands would still have been developing and inconsistent. Bone snow goggles were a real Sámi invention, used to reduce glare from the snow during bright winter travel. They were typically carved with narrow eye slits and tied with sinew. The light has begun to fade again, though it is still early. The sky moves quickly here, shifting between calm and cloud without warning. A hush falls over the shoreline. Even the seabirds are quiet. You sit beside your sled, mending a strap that has frayed near the edge. Your cousin tends to the reindeer, brushing ice from their fur and checking their hooves. The camp is still, but it does not feel peaceful. It feels watched. One of the younger Norsemen walks past with a coil of rope and does not meet your eyes. Another sharpens a blade too close to the fire, the metal hissing with heat as he dips it into a bowl of snowmelt. The elder remains by the shore, speaking softly with two men who carry axes openly across their backs. You notice the young Norseman again, the one who once traded fairly, now standing off to the side. He glances toward you, then away. There is recognition in his face, but no certainty. Your cousin steps quietly to your side and speaks in a low voice. He says the elder will not leave with empty hands. If the trade does not shift, there will be no camp left to return to. You reach for the white fox pelt. It is rare, clean, beautifully preserved. It was not meant for this trade. It was meant for a festival, for honor, for something better. But it is what you have, and it is what might keep this from becoming something worse. You rise, approach the elder, and lay the pelt on the stone beside him without speaking. He looks at it for a long time. Then he nods, stands, and calls off the men with axes. They do not leave, but they sit. The mood begins to settle. The sharp edge of the afternoon dulls slightly, like a blade set aside but not forgotten. The trade ends without words. Your cousin ties the last bundle onto the sled. You turn toward the trail. White fox furs were among the most valuable trade items offered by northern peoples. These furs were rare and highly prized for both their beauty and their use in ceremonial or high-status clothing across Europe and parts of the Middle East. Sámi traders did not always bring their finest goods to each meeting. Some items were reserved for special exchanges, religious offerings, or celebration. Offering one in desperation could carry emotional and spiritual weight. Tensions at trading sites were not always recorded in historical sources, but later medieval accounts reflect a shift from partnership to coercion as Norse influence grew in the north. The expectation of tribute replaced earlier systems of voluntary trade in some areas. Sámi responses to Norse pressure varied by region and circumstance. In some places, agreements were made to avoid violence. In others, communities withdrew farther inland or resisted through silence, migration, or spiritual means. Fox fur trade from the north reached far beyond Scandinavia, eventually becoming part of international networks that linked the far Arctic with markets as distant as Baghdad and Constantinople. The wind has changed. It comes now from the west, colder than before, but steadier. The sky is a soft gray that deepens as the day fades. Snow falls again, light and dry, brushing across your face and settling into the folds of your cloak. The reindeer are calm as they move up the trail. Their hooves press into the fresh powder, leaving narrow tracks that vanish behind them in the wind. Your sled creaks faintly, its runners dragging along a familiar path. The forest swells around you once more. The trees stand tall and unmoving, their branches heavy with snow. You pass the place where the broken camp once stood, though nothing of it is visible now. Only clean snow and bent grass beneath the surface. You remember a charm your grandmother used to carry, carved from driftwood and worn smooth with age. She said it helped her find the path home, even in thick fog. You think about carving one for yourself. As you climb a low rise, you pause and look back. The fjord is out of sight now, hidden behind the trees and hills. The trade is behind you. The faces are behind you. But something of the tension lingers in your shoulders, in the way your hands rest too tightly on the sled's frame. Your cousin walks past without stopping. The bells on the led reindeer jingle once, then settle. You take a breath and keep walking. The snow thickens as the light fades. You follow the curve of the land, not because you can see it, but because you know it. The same way your father did, the same way his father did before him. And the trail, though soft and shifting, still holds you. Seasonal returns to inland camps were a core part of Sámi migration patterns. After winter trade along the coast, families would often retreat inland to more sheltered grazing areas for the remainder of the season. Snow and wind patterns were essential guides to Sámi travelers. Paths were followed not only by sight, but also by feel, memory, and subtle environmental cues. Sámi oral tradition preserved information across generations about travel, survival, and weather. Memory-based wayfinding allowed Sámi herders to navigate vast, often trackless landscapes with accuracy and confidence. Many Sámi carried or created protective charms or objects connected to family lineage and personal memory. These were often carved from natural materials and worn or kept on the person during travel. The sense of nonverbal communication and endurance in silence is a theme that appears in Sámi cultural traditions, particularly in stories of travel and survival in challenging terrain. The fire is already lit when you return. Your cousin had gone ahead with the reindeer, and the smoke rising from the lavu's vent was the first thing you saw as the trees thinned. The tent is warmer than you remembered, the stones inside dry and glowing, their heat sinking deep into the earth beneath the floor. You hang your cloak by the door, brush the snow from your boots, and sit quietly on the ground. The walls shift with the firelight. Shadows move gently across the hides. A pot of broth simmers on the stones, smelling of bone and pine needles. The reindeer rest outside, their forms dim beneath the falling snow, legs folded beneath them, heads turned away from the wind. Your cousin speaks only once. He says the lead reindeer is favoring one leg, but it will be fine by spring. You nod, and offer him the antler charm from the broken camp. He turns it in his hand once, then places it near the stones beside the fire, close to the others. Later, you reach into your own pack and draw out the small fox pelt. Not the white one, you left that behind, but a smaller piece, rough around the edges. You smooth it flat and lay it near the sleeping skins. You will stitch it into a lining, not for warmth, but to remember. The wind brushes against the side of the tent. The broth hisses softly. You lie back and listen to the fire settle into coals. Outside, snow continues to fall. And beyond the snow, the hills rise up in silence, and the forest holds its shape beneath the sky. Returning to camp after trade was an important part of the Sámi seasonal cycle. Winter homes were typically small, efficient, and warm. built for survival through long periods of cold and darkness. Sámi families often shared a single fire pit, using it for cooking, warmth, and ritual offerings. Stones that held heat were reused across generations and sometimes carried symbolic meaning. Animal-based materials like fur and sinew were repurposed in everyday tools, clothing, and bedding. Even small or damaged pelts had value and were often integrated into personal items. Sámi's spiritual practice emphasized continuity, memory, and quiet respect for objects of meaning. Items found or exchanged during a journey could become part of family memory through use or placement in the home. The quiet rhythm of daily life, the presence of snow, fire, and ancestral memory, remains central to Sámi cultural identity and traditional storytelling today. Thank you for listening.